I'll get on with the subject. What I'm talking about is when I was 9 years old, I went up to my father, and my father was strange for a Japanese. He was 6'4" and 220 pounds. He was a rather large man. I am the smallest male in my family, out of all the family. And I went up to my dad and I say, "Hey, Dad, I finally figured out what I want to do for the rest of my life and what I want it to be." I said, "I just want to be rich." He says, "Okay." I said, "So Dad, how do I become rich?" And he says, "What the rich know how to do is they know how to make money." I said, "Good." So I ran off, and I got my friend Michael, and he was my first business partner at age 9. We were both in school together, and we set out to make money. And our first business venture, what we did was we went around our neighborhood in Hawaii, and we collected, you know what, do you have the brand Crest toothpaste out here, by any chance? It was Crest toothpaste back in the 1950s. And in those days, the toothpaste tube was made out of lead. So Michael and I would run around and we'd collect all these toothpastes. We'd go to our neighbors, knock on their doors and say, "Would you mind saving your empty toothpaste tube?" And they go, "Sure," you know. And one day my mother comes home and there's this box next to her washing machine full of these ugly looking toothpaste tubes. And she's wondering what he and I, my first business venture, were up to. So one day my dad comes driving up with one of his school teacher friends, and they find me out there with this fire going, and Michael and I are melting down the lead. And the dad and his friend come over and they look at what are we doing? He says, "What are you boys doing here?" And what we had done, we had taken plaster of Paris and we had put U.S. coins in there. So we're pouring it and popping it out, and I had $50, silver quarters, you know, made out of lead. And my father says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Doing what you told us. We're making money." And his friend just started laughing and says, "Leave the boy alone. He might have a talent here, you know." And so I found out at a very early age what the word counterfeiting meant. And so I was very confused. You know, I said, "Dad, I still want to be a rich man. How do I make money?" And my dad looked at me and says, "Number one, there's 2 reasons, don't ask me. Number one is I'm a school teacher. And school teachers don't know how to make money. Number 2, I'm Japanese. Japanese don't know how to make money." He says, "Why don't you ask Michael's father? He knows how to make money. He's Chinese." So Michael and I ran off and went to see his dad. And his dad was Chinese, and he began to teach Michael and I the art of making money. So for those of you who are Chinese in the audience, what I'm about to tell you, you probably already heard from your parents. So as I grew older, it got really difficult in my family, because my dad, being a school teacher, would say, you know, "Be good, study hard." And I'd say, "Why?" He said, "So you can get good grades." I said, "Why?" "So you can find a good job." I said, "Okay, why?" And he says, "You can find a good company to work for." And then I'd go across town and talk to Michael's dad, and all he would say to me, he says, "You don't want a good company to work for. You want to study hard to find out how to buy a company and sell it." And it really caused a conflict in me. If you can imagine me being 17 years old, sitting in high school, and it was true, I flunked out twice, not once, but twice, because I was bored. And every time the teacher tried to threaten me, say, "You're not applying yourself, you don't have good grades, blah, blah, blah." I said, "What for?" She says, "So you can get a good job." I said, "Well, I don't need a good job, because I'm going to buy and sell companies." So she said, she says, "Well, a company would never hire somebody like you." I said, "Ooh, that might be a good company to buy." She says, "Well, I would never work for a man like you." And I said, "Don't worry, love, we wouldn't hire you anyway." That's when I was thrown out the second time. So I had a different educational background, and it was tough, like I said, with my 2 dads. Now the reason I bring this up is, how many people here realize that America is in fairly big financial trouble right now? How many people realize that? Good. For those who do not know that, one of the main reasons I'm here talking to you today is as your great country goes up and my great country starts coming down, there are lessons for all of us to learn here. And one of the biggest lessons to learn here is that since 1980, 43 million jobs have been lost in America. That's twice your population. I don't mean people were retrenched or fired. It's the jobs are gone. Do you understand that? They're gone. When the factories left, whole towns were shut down. 43 million jobs. And when they say the unemployment rate in America is less than 6%, they're lying with statistics. The way it really works is that if somebody has not found a job for over 6 months, they don't count them in the unemployment. They're lost. And so what we have are factory towns like Camden, New Jersey, East St. Louis, Missouri. And what happened to them is they have an 80 to 90% unemployment rate. So when you hear about the crime, it is because there's no jobs. And nobody really minded as long as it was only African American people. But the spread kept coming. And now many people realize they're letting go highly educated people right now. Many people realize that right now. There are people with PhDs who can't find work. My next door neighbor is an international banker. He's 55 years old. He has 2 children, one 16, one 8. His bank merged with another bank, and all of a sudden he doesn't have a job. Now the reason I'm talking to you today is because I do not take the subject of money lightly. My dad did, my real dad. And the thing, no, he always, being a school teacher, he said, well, we're not interested in money. We're school teachers. And then what happened in 1970, my dad got retrenched. What he did was he ran against the governor of the state of Hawaii, and he lost. And the because the governor was his boss. As head of education, the governor was his boss. And the governor says, you will never work in this state again. So at the age of 50, my father never worked again. And I saw a great tall man go down because all he wanted to do was teach. So that's why I speak on this subject. So the thing that I found out when I talked to my dad in the later years, he says one of the problems with education is that what schools focus on in America, and I apologize, I don't really know your system here, is they focus on a thing called SAT. Is it up there? Oh. What SAT stands for is Scholastic Aptitude Testing. What is important in education in America is your scholarship. Can you read? Can you write? Can you do mathematics? That's what they count on. If you do really, after about the age 15 or 16, they begin focusing on PAT or professional aptitude tests. Out here, I think they call it streamlining or something like this or whatever it is. They want to find out if you're good at scholarship, will you be a doctor? Or if you're not good at scholarship, will you be a mechanic? And then they start streamlining into professions. And what they never do in the American system is they never teach financial aptitude. And so that's why in America, the biggest problem happening right now is a tremendous gap between the haves and the what? Have-nots. Because financial education is left up to the parents. So a poor parent will teach their children poor attitudes. So the benefit that I had was having my Chinese father teach me financial aptitude. So what I'm going to do is really quickly go over some of the stuff my Chinese father taught me, not what my Japanese father taught me. And it'll be a very quick, and because I was only 9 or 10 years old, my Chinese father had to teach me in very simple diagrams. And those simple diagrams are the main reason today I never have to work for the rest of my life. It was a simple diagrams. And so my dad used to say, well, don't listen to Michael's dad. He never graduated from high school. I said, okay. The man's illiterate. I said, okay. I said, but Dad, the guy's a multi-millionaire. I don't care. And my dad being Michael's dad had about 1,000 employees, had multiple businesses, and my dad had about 1,000 school teachers working for him. So this is what Michael's dad taught me, and it's just basic financial aptitude. And what my dad would say is Michael's dad's illiterate. The guy couldn't read. You know, my dad was being an intellectual, graduated from university in less than 2 years, top of his class. My dad was a voracious reader, scholarship. He could read 2 to 3 books a week. Michael's dad read nothing a week. But where my dad was literate was in words, but he was illiterate when it came to numbers. And Michael's dad was literate in numbers. Do you get my drift right here? Like, I learned to, also went to school to play the saxophone, and I learned to read music. Well, I'm illiterate when it comes to music too. I don't use the stuff. So what Michael's dad finally taught me was really simple, and this is very simple diagramming here. Most Americans, I don't know how about here, are financially or numerically illiterate. So this is called an income statement here. And this is called a balance sheet. On this top area right here, you put the words INC for income. Down here you put expenses. This is the way he taught me. Over here you have asset, and over here you have liability. Now, Michael's dad said there was one main reason there were so many people who were poor or struggling financially, and that was they did not understand the definition between asset and liability. They had them confused, including the bankers and accountants. So I will give you my Chinese dad's definition of an asset. He said an asset is something that puts money in your pocket without you working for it. I'll say it again. An asset puts money in your what? Pocket, without you having to do any work. And a liability was something that took money out of your pocket. Now, that's not that tough. Very simple definitions. Or another way he would say it was that if you stopped working, an asset would feed you. And he said a liability would then eat you. That's how simple he taught me this stuff. Now, interestingly enough, as my educated dad, my Japanese dad, he would list over here under an asset his house and his car. And my Chinese dad would list over here his house and his car. Now you know why I'm so confused. And ironically, if you talk to most bankers, which one would they say it is? Asset. And so my Chinese father said, a lot of these people sit around and they're trying to figure out assets and liabilities. And he said the only thing that really counts, that determines whether something is an asset or a liability, is a word called cash flow. If it flowed into your pocket, it was an asset. If it flowed out of your pocket, it was a liability. Very simple. So, at my house, I have an altar to the God of cash flow. I want it flowing in. So, the problem with America today is we have millions and millions of people who are counting assets, counting liabilities, which are really, counting assets, no, even one thing. They're counting liabilities as assets. That's what they're doing. That's pretty simple. Okay. So I will show you then, is cash flow becoming everything? I will show you a couple of diagrams that he would teach me with. And this was teaching us financial literacy. What my Chinese father would say is this. If you look at it, I'll go back a little bit. Is the way it really works here is this. What happens for most people is they get a thing called a job. The income comes in here, and the income flows out. So, most kids, and I'll use US dollars because I'm most familiar with, let's say they have an income of $1,000 a month. The first expense is a thing called rent, and then food, and stereo and CDs and stuff like that. Then after the person gets married, what's the first thing they buy is a house. Now they have a liability or they get a credit card. So the American public starts to go into debt right away. Then they have a thing called kids. Where do kids stack up? Kids are a very big expense. They're not an asset, trust me. They're very expensive items. Okay, so that's how that thing works here. Now, so what Michael's father used to teach me wasn't so much asset and liability, but what he would do is he'd pick up financial statements and he would look for a thing called cash flow. He'd look for the pattern. And he said this, here's a job, cash would come in and cash would go out. And if a person did this over a lifetime, this was the cash flow pattern of somebody who was poor. That was a poor person's cash flow pattern.